Are you ready for a reboot? Welcome to the Sheila Mack Show, reality at its finest. History reminds us those hit hardest often become the change makers. This year, we've all hit crazy economic, social, and emotional rock bottoms. We all get knocked down. Something hits globally, locally, personally. It affects our health, finances, our relationships. We have to recreate a business or career. Each show, Sheila and her special guest will be sharing their reboot stories, guiding you with real solutions to upgrade and up-level emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. Here on NBC's KCAA Radio.
Welcome to the Sheila Mack Show, reality at its finest. Here we have real people sharing real stories and actionable steps to help you reinvent, rebuild, and reboot your business and personal life on your terms. I'm your host, Sheila Mack, and today we have special guest Simon Squibb. Simon is an entrepreneur, an angel investor, a mentor, podcast host, and founder and chief purpose officer at the Purposeful Project. He has started 17 companies, invested in over 60 plus startups, and has mentored hundreds of founders. Having sold his award-winning branding and digital agency Fluid to PwC, Simon now focuses on inspiring, motivating, and guiding both budding and experienced entrepreneurs by sharing his personal experiences, insights, and ideas and tips. His mission is to help 1 million people start and grow a business on their own. All right, welcome to the show, Simon.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
And I like to start off each show. This show actually came about based on my new best-selling book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. I wrote that right before the pandemic. And we have had every situation that we couldn't even fathom before 2020. So I'd like to start off with maybe if you have a time in your business or personal life that you could share with the audience where you hit a tough situation, a rough spot, and how you got back on track.
Yeah, to be honest, that has happened to me many times. I think it's, I guess the first time it really was the biggest, life moment, which I feel I did come back from, was when I was 15 years old and my father suddenly died. And my father was just 56 years old. He died of a heart attack. And of course, like any 15-year-old, it was a major shock.
You were very young, 15 years old, and you had just lost your dad very young at 56 years old himself.
So basically at that moment, weirdly, I guess it sounds weird. I find it hard to even talk about it. But like 2 weeks later, I had an argument with my mother and she kicked me out of home, basically. And so she did the whole my way or the highway. And so I ended up literally on the highway. And I found myself out on the streets and wondering what to do next. So at that moment, something quite weird happened to me. I think for the first time in my life, I asked myself the question of what am I meant to be doing with my life? What is my purpose? It's the first time I think I'd really thought about the word purpose. Up until that point, being quite academic at school, learning like all kids do and going through the emotions of growing up. But suddenly I'd gone from surrounded by my 3 brothers and parents and I guess somewhat of a safe environment to on the streets. But something really amazing happened to me. Part of my brain woke up that I'd never had working before. And I call it the entrepreneurial muscle in my brain woke up. And I basically discovered this concept that you can have an idea in your head and you can make it real. So I had this idea to start a gardening company and saw that someone who had a big house had a messy garden and I could turn that into a business. So that's what I did. I knocked on the door of that house that had a big, massive garden, but was very messy, and said, "Hey, I'm Simon Squibb, and I'd like to be your gardener. I'd like to take care of your garden." And to my surprise, the owner of the property said, "Sure, I've been looking for a garden. That's great. How much do you charge?" And that day, that I remember it like it was yesterday, I knocked on 111 people's doors, managed to get 9 people to confirm that I would be their gardener. And by the following week, I had to hire people to help me do the work. and I'd started a gardening company, and I suddenly had this, as I say, entrepreneurial insight that now, frankly, gave me the life I've got today, which I am absolutely in love with and very privileged to have. So that was certainly a very low moment, a very difficult time. I don't mind admitting I've had therapy about it since, but I have definitely come back from it, and it gave me something at the same time.
Wow, that's incredible. So were you able to reunite at some point with your family?
Yeah, yes, in short, I've reconnected with my brothers and I reconnected with my mother. To be honest, just being very frank about it, I've never had the same relationship with my mother. From 0 to 15, I had a very close relationship with my mother, but from 15 onwards, the dynamic was quite different. And so I've forgiven her, I guess, for kicking me out. But I've never really, and actually I've told her that it did me an incredible favor in many ways. It woke me up and brought me into the real world, but she didn't do it to help me. So I don't, I'm not close to her for it. Let's put it that way. But I do also at the same time appreciate that sometimes these crazy moments that happen to you in life can sometimes somehow, in some crazy twist of fate, be a good thing.
Yes, I really believe that these rock bottom events are the time where you can reinvent your life on your terms, no matter the situation. And grief, it hits people in such different ways that they do things that maybe they would never have done. It's just a weird thing when we go into grief. I know I lost my youngest son last year. He had a heart condition and he passed away at 22. And with all the training and everything I've had working with my other children, it hit us hard. And then we had the pandemic hit, and my daughter, which was closest to him, said, "Mom, we needed this universal time to just have family and just pause, because it was too much for us all to just keep going." And that happens. And yet the greatest gift, like you, we get gifts out of everything that happens, even when it's such a sad and difficult time like that. And so that's something that finding the gifts. And then when you were sharing about how you started your gardening business at a young age, a landscaper, and then you hired people, that's incredible. So you already figured out, I need to delegate. I can't do this by myself. And the first tip for anyone listening in, starting a business or in a business that's struggling, what door are you not knocking on because you're afraid that you're going to get a no?
Quite right. I mean, to be honest, I delegated because I didn't have the ability to do the job. And so otherwise I would have probably done the work myself. The first garden I did, no one really taught me about delegation and the power of delegation. But I only learned it because I wasn't able to physically do the work. I wasn't that way inclined. And so I think that's a learning I've had since, though, that, I lived in China for a while and everyone said, learn Chinese. And in a bizarre twist, I didn't. And that meant I had to hire really good people that could speak Chinese. And so in some respects, it gave me an edge because I hired people to do. So my whole career, I've learned this kind of like, there's people out there that can do the job better than me. Maybe those that can't start things up or they don't have the risk appetite. So those sorts of people work well with me because I do have the risk appetite, but quite often they have the talent.
That's so smart. And it's hard to delegate in a way, we think, because we're limited financially, and yet you didn't have anything. You're on the streets and you were able to delegate. So there is a way. What tips do you have for businesses today or people starting out that need to delegate and feel like their funds are tied up or they really don't have the money to delegate?
I honestly believe money is the first virtual reality we've all bought into as real. And so I've invested in a lot of businesses, and what I've discovered in that process is that people need the money in their mind. They often don't need the money in reality. So, for example, I invested in someone, and the conversation wasn't about the value of their business. It was about what they needed in the bank to feel comfortable to start the business. Because often people say that this is the amount of money they need for the business, but what they really mean is just the amount of money they need to know they can cover all their bills. Long story short, the amount was about $500,000 that they felt like if they had that in the bank, they knew they could do this business and commit to it and go full time, blah, blah, blah. And so I invested £500,000 or just over $500,000 in the business. And long story short, they a year into the business, they gave me the money back because they never touched it, because it was all in their head. And they actually won work, they charged deposit, the money came in, they then hired people. They actually never needed that money. They just thought they needed that money. It was all a psychological barrier to starting. And that happens with so many people. They say, I can't start a business, I don't have money. Mm-hmm. And actually, you don't need money to start a business. That's probably step 9 or 10 in building a business. Sometimes you need money, but most businesses don't. And a lot of people don't believe that. They believe that money is the starting point of a business. That is so not true. So that's been my experience.
And it's so easy, maybe if you have a lot of funds set aside, to pay for so many trainings and so much information and never really take action and do the steps you need to do. And a lot of times in a new business, you need to make mistakes, and those are learnings. And it makes all the difference. My first business was 23 years old. I started a gift store. It was 5,000 square feet, 5,000 a month. And this is a long time ago, because I have my daughter's 25, so you can just imagine. And when I started that, I got 6 months free rent, and I thought that was like a lifetime. I had to learn, and I made every single mistake there was in running a gift store. And all of a sudden, I started making money. Then I hired a marketing company for a short time, and I was making $50,000-$60,000 a month at 24. By the time I was 24 in this gift store, after making every single mistake. And so it was a great learning for me. And it helped me in all the other businesses. I ended up with five buildings and 5 stores, and I bought the other buildings. No more paying rent. And so that was the best. I couldn't imagine somebody just here's the keys, take this building, and I'm going to give you all the people. You don't know. You have to have your finger on the pulse on every little part of your business to kind of have a clue what's going on. So it made a big difference for me.
It's, I think that journey, a lot of people don't realize. I've seen cases where people that have raised a lot of money for their companies do worse than those that have no money, because they're not in touch with the client as much, for example, so they can just throw money at the problem. Or they hire people that lose touch with the infrastructure. And so money actually does not make a business better. It can make a business weaker. And just like you, I have a similar story. The gardening company, I tell a lot of young people not to get in debt. I tell a lot of young people not to get a mortgage when they're young and buy a property and lose that deposit money and then lose the monthly fixed cost they have with ownership. I meet so many people in their 30s who want to start a business and say they can't because they've got a mortgage to pay. So they're cash poor and property rich. And yes, when they're 60, they're going to own a property and probably die in it. And so, but they've given up on their dreams to have that fake dream. And what I always try to tell people, the story of my experience was, I basically, my first office was a barter to the cricket club where I was operating the gardening company. Said you can have the cricket club clubhouse as your office if you take care of the cricket club grounds as a barter, which I did. So I got my office for free, and I lived in that office for about 9 months. And so I had no rent, no mortgage, no office costs, and that's how I was able to build up a business. And when you're young, you can do these things, and you can. Later, when you get children and you have, other companies, I think it's harder and harder. But I think a lot of young people get caught in this system, this trap, this debt system, that then stops you from being able to take the risks that you just described you took. I'm pretty sure you didn't have a property, personal mortgage over your head. To start those businesses, you need to be free. You need to keep the costs low, sleep on a friend's sofa, whatever's needed to the business is working. And then, like you did, you can buy the buildings and you can do all these other crazy things. But you've got to start at a low cost base, I think.
Oh, exactly. I had a triplex I finally invested in, and I lived in this small little back unit, like, I don't know, 700 square feet, and rented the rest off and paid the mortgage off in like 4 years. And I kept going like that. And I, even with all my businesses, I paid the buildings off before I even bought a nice house. It was a long time. And it was.
That's what I tell people. You've done it the right way. I think at the end of the day, you invest in a business that you love that brings in income. If you invest in a property, it's not an asset; it's a liability.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you live in it, it's a liability. It sits there as it doesn't actually do anything for you. Okay, yeah, it can have accumulated in value increase, but then you have to sell it and you have lifestyle inflation. It's quite hard to sell it. Where are you going to live? So, but if you've got a business that brings an income and build brand, not a business, you can really build an asset. And a lot of people don't get this. And only those like you that have been through it will know it. But teaching young people that is one of my big missions.
Oh, I love that. That's a great concept. And it's so much easier now to not buy because it's ridiculous. Yep. In the United States, it's just gone crazy right now. We have hyper housing inflation. and so that's really interesting to do that, or to at least, if you are in a house and you're in a mortgage, see if you can house hack and rent out a portion, maybe divide it somewhat with a wall and rent that out. So that will cover your mortgage costs, your living expenses. And then once that's paid off, you can invest somewhere else. So that there's lots of
so many different ways to do it. I mean, I rented out a room to cover the cost of my rent in the end as well. And then once I got my businesses to a point where they were working, I bought my home cash. I don't have them. And you know, it's frankly, there's no such thing as really cheap money. It's a bit of a trick. There's people that have the cheap money, aren't generous people sitting there saying, oh, let's give people cheap money because we're kind. You know, it is a business. And people are making money when they lend you that money. So I always tell people, if you can, you know, try to build your business up first before getting into these lifestyle stuff, which Instagram promotes so well. You know, the things that own you, not, you know, you don't own them, they own you. So trying to control those things and not let the debt system that's been created to help you spend money suck you in and stop you doing what you love.
Yes. Now, that's a great question that you brought up. When your business owns you, there's so many small business owners that I know that I work with, even that they are actually owned by their business. They actually own a job and they go to work every day and they pay everybody else and they barely make their lifestyle any better. But everybody that works for them is doing great, and they're just working. They're paying to work. What advice do you have for people to structure maybe a new business or restructure a business they're in where they can have the lifestyle that they're working for and not be owned by the business?
Yeah, this is a very common problem actually, and not talked about enough within the entrepreneurial space, because you kind of think, you know, you have a job, and I absolutely think a job is a trap. And actually, I always tell people it's less risk to start your own business than work for someone else. And a lot of people can't understand that. Working for someone else seems less risky to people. But the truth is, when you work for someone else, it's easier at the beginning and gets harder over time. When you work for yourself, it's harder at the beginning, it gets easier over time. And so, but when it comes to like people, the middle bit you're talking about here, which is really fascinating, is people that have started businesses but then get trapped by that business. And so, like you're talking about, in a way, they've created a job for themselves. Now, I have been in that situation myself. I have built businesses that I haven't particularly loved, but have had kind of no choice but to run them for a while, because I'm the only one that can take no salary. I'm the only one with experience that can make it work. And I've been in that situation. And what I learned, and I've started now 19 businesses, so I've had a lot of experience. And one thing I've learned along that journey is that I should, and I always do now, when the business is at a certain point, I bring in someone to run it as soon as I can, because otherwise I get trapped in the business, right? The more I build it, especially around entrepreneurs tend to build businesses around them. Have you lost me? Sorry, my signal seems to be.
Oh, I still have you on here.
Oh, okay. So I always tell people a couple of things. First, as quickly as you can, bring someone in to replace you. Now, it might seem for a lot of people counterintuitive, because what happens is they get the business to, say, break even, and the idea of hiring someone and paying them is like, oh no, I'm going to start losing money. But the reality is, if you bring someone in to run it, one, you can do something else, or you can work on the business instead of in the business. And what actually ends up happening if you bring in the right person is they end up making the business a lot more profitable, and you can scale. Because the only way you scale in life is by buying time, not selling time. So if you start becoming the business center of that business, it's very hard to scale. This is my counter argument to people that think building personal brand is a good idea. I've always built company brands. I've never really called anything Simon Squibb Limited. I've always called things Fluid or Nest or whatever it is, but not Simon Squibb, because it's very hard to scale Simon Squibb, but it's very easy to scale a brand once you've built it. And anyone can run a brand, whereas not everyone can run Simon Squibb. So I always warn people about personal brand. It sounds cool. In reality, it can end up being a trap, because you're the one having to produce all the content. You are the brand, so it's quite hard to sell it. And that's where a lot of people go wrong.
So what advice do you have for anybody listening in that has started to build a brand based on their name, and they want to make a switch? What would be the best route to do that?
Well, I think personal brand in today's world is useful if, for example, you want to be an influencer. But just keep in mind, I personally wouldn't want to be the Kardashians personally. I feel that they are trapped by their own fame. I don't want to judge, but they don't have, in my view, a very free life, security all the time around them, and there's all that hype. And I feel like, the ones I admire, frankly, more are the ones that build like a company and their name is built because of the company's success. So, like them or not, it's up to you. But Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, or Bill Gates, Microsoft, or of course Jeff Bezos and Amazon, or Elon Musk and Tesla. If you build a good company, your personal brand will happen by default. So I have a personal brand, and I have people that like me, but really I built that reputation of success on the companies that I built. So what I always tell people, if you can, try to direct your personal brand into a company brand, into something that is scalable, that someone else could run if you wanted a year off. I just took 2 years off, and I couldn't have done that if it had been Simon Squibb on the front of the door. So I think you can use your personal brand. My advice is leverage your name, but don't make your name the business if you can help it. Otherwise, you will get stuck forever having to either push out content or forever be the salesperson for the business, and that limits the business.
That is such a great concept and so important, because there are people that are stuck in their brand, and if they get sick or they just want to travel, like you said, for a couple of years, that's not possible. And all my businesses earlier on, they were cash flowing. A lot of them became passive income with the investments I made along the way as well. And with that, I was able to travel 7 years full time and work on my passion, working with people, consulting, helping people. And I loved that. But I wouldn't be able to I bought that time with the work I had to put in all those years, living in the smaller unit and working the longer hours, and really being dedicated to building the stores and different things that I did. And so that does make a difference. And it is the same with buying the property. It's the same with the brand. It's kind of almost counterintuitive, but it's it's the way that actually works and serves so much better. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
The old story of like McDonald's. McDonald's is not in the burger business. McDonald's, of course, they sell burgers, but they're in the property business, right? They're in the property business. And so a lot of people get confused about business models, and they think, oh, I know, I'll open up a burger shop and I'll sell burgers, and if I sell a lot of burgers, I'll make a profit. But that's not where the money is. Money is in brand. Yeah. McDonald's real value is in their brand. It's got nothing to do with burgers being sold. And so, but yeah, and the other thing is, you've done what I think is basically a real life MBA, what you're talking about there. A lot of people go and do MBAs and try to learn in retrospect what business is about. I think that's a complete waste of money. If you want to learn about business, either work with someone like you or go do it yourself, and you'll learn everything in 6 months that, you'll spend $100,000, $200,000 learning in 2 or 3 years in case studies that are out of date anyway. So everyone should do a real life MBA like you've done.
Yes, that's great. And I would love to hear more about your podcast, a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, the world does not need another podcast. But I decided to start a podcast not because it was cool, but because I felt like, in particular, the COVID pandemic, when it hit, that I could see from all the news reports that hundreds of thousands of people were going to lose their job or not find a job like they would normally expect. Say, for example, coming out of university, people just expected a job. And I could see from the job number reports that because of COVID, in England, for example, in the last 12 months, 700,000 people should be in work are not in work right now. And that doesn't even take into consideration the people that are coming out of university would have got a job and can't find one right now, and the general economic devastation. So I felt like I had to do something to help. Now, I'm not a doctor, so I couldn't go on the front line and help in that way, but I do understand business, and I do understand how to start businesses. And I feel like people don't realize that everyone's an entrepreneur. No one's born anything. No one's born a doctor. No one's born a lawyer. Everybody needs training. Everybody needs guidance. And the system, the present education system in America and in the UK, was really designed 100 years ago by folks like Henry Ford to get you to, frankly, have enough of an education to want to buy his car, but not enough knowledge to want to go out there and build your own factory. So the education system is still designed really to give you enough knowledge that you're hungry for things, but not enough knowledge to go out there and understand how things own you if you don't structure things right. So I'm on a mission now since COVID hit to help, as you mentioned, millions of people start a business of their own. And the way I'm doing that, in part, is through things like our podcast, where we interview the world's most successful entrepreneurs, and they share their stories, how they do it, how they did it. What was the ingredients, the secret recipe to them, for them to make it? And then how can we get that knowledge in the hands of people that want to start a business? So, a lot of these people have written books, and they've even said it themselves, their whole knowledge is in that book, but they had to spread it over, 50,000 words, and we managed to capture the essence of what they've learned in 20, 30, 40 years of building companies into a podcast, so that when someone listens to it, it's mentorship at scale. It's knowledge. They're free to help people understand how to start a business, how to grow a business, and how to make a business successful. So that's what the podcast is about. It's called the Purposeful Project podcast. And we feel very honored that some of the guests we've had on, tremendous knowledge, tremendous experience, and they share all that knowledge for free to try and help people.
Mm-hmm. There's something about getting information like we have today. We didn't have that when I was in my 20s. We didn't have the availability that we have to learn from other people's mistakes, really. This is what I did right. This is what I did wrong. Don't do this in business. These bits of advice, just small course corrections, can make all the difference in whether you have a successful business or not, or whether you can scale that business, or if you go out of business because you didn't put in the time. And now it's a free education when you're able to tune into podcasts and read books and learn how to apply the new business strategies that we need today. So exactly. Yeah, that's so.
And it's all out for free. That's what I always tell people. People always, they're paying for courses and paying for this and that. They don't need to. It's all there for free. If you can just get past the clickbait and the course rubbish, there is so much knowledge. If you want to learn entrepreneurship, it is there to be had. It's all mindset anyway.
And it's mindset. And then I think one of the things is it's back to that application, the willingness to do the work. So when anybody listening in, if you're just starting a business, it's like you said, Simon, you're going to have to put in some of the work yourself. You may not be able to hire anybody for a little while. That's okay. But that work, when you have a solid training and you have solid foundations of good advice from other people, you're able to not waste a lot of that money that you would waste. And you put in the work, though, no matter what, there's a cost. It doesn't happen in one day.
This is a really interesting point, because when I was younger, I used to think the answer was working hard. And as I got more experienced, I've realized that, sayings like the harder you work, the luckier you get is in fact a lie. Because the way to make things actually scale is, without sounding cheesy about it, is to work smart, not hard. So I personally made the most amount of money when I brought in other people to run my companies for me. And actually they made more money and I made more money. And this kind of 1 + 1 = 11 mindset. And actually one of the big things that I never really was able to understand, and now I do understand, is how important luck is in the process of being successful. So, and a lot of people would argue, well, you work hard, you'll get lucky. Well, if that was true, every nurse in the world right now would be a billionaire. Every frontline worker right now would be a billionaire. It is not true. The harder you work, the luckier you get. Luck is a lot more complicated than that. And in fact, there is a formula for getting more luck, but it is quite complicated. And to get it, it's not just about working hard. It's about quite a few other things.
Yes, I love. What do you have to share with people about teamwork, building teamwork, working with a team or a group of, when you have employees? What suggestions do you have to make that really as easy as possible?
Well, I always say, when it comes to managing people and managing a team, I always, from my own experience, because I was really bad at managing people when I was 15, 16, 17 years old. I mean, I look back and I cringe at the way I managed people back in those early days, because I really didn't know what I was doing. And I think what I've learned key in the last, 15 companies I built in recent time is manage purpose, not people. Say again, manage purpose, not people. And what this basically means is, instead of telling people what to do and how to do it, and let's even say having clear job descriptions, which everyone kind of talks about in business school, the reality is that you hire people that have the ability to do a certain thing, but make sure that they enjoy that certain thing they have the ability to do. But the most important thing is to make sure that your company has a purpose that excites them. So in other words, you're not motivating them to get up and go to work. They're motivated by the purpose of the business. And if the purpose of the business isn't there, what ends up happening for a lot of people, and I've got these people you were just mentioning earlier, these kind of just breaking even, finding it hard folks, they're busy pushing their people. They're so tired, and they blame the people for not performing, whatever the reason. They left, they quit, they're not, they want more money, this, that, the other. And what they've not done is they've not installed purpose in their business. And because there's no clear purpose other than make money, there's no clear mission for the reason the company's there, they end up, frankly, dying on their feet. And that's also what I see with people that go to work in companies for the brand image or the paycheck. They're dead on their feet. Slowly they have to either their soul, frankly, leaves them, and they just succumb to it being about the car they own, the house they own, the holidays they have. They live for the time when they're not at work, instead of the way it's meant to be, which is you enjoy what you do. I mean, I actually don't need to go on holiday. I love what I do. That is my holiday, doing what I love. Even when I go on holiday, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. A lot of people that never tried it don't know. But I think the key to managing people is, ironically, not to manage people. Key is competent people with a good moral code that aligns with yours, that actually enjoy the thing they're good at, and then install purpose, and you'll never have to manage anyone ever again.
That is So on point. That is incredible. I mean, going back to my example of this store, the top manager that I hired was, I think, probably 56, 57 years old. I'm 23, right? And she's like, "You're my boss. I can't believe this." And I was like, "No, we're together." And, she wanted to tour with her husband, who's a musician. So when he went on tour, she wanted to have the freedom to leave. But she had also been the top salesperson at a big department store. And before that, she was a social worker. And she was my social worker. Her heart was to help all the kids we trained in that business. That business had a heart, and it was a family. Getting paid was the last thing on my mind. It had to do with service and community and these people. And over 200 kids went through this program, this job training program at the store alone. And that was what motivated her and a lot of people to be there, or to be with their babies and help out. So it was that. And no matter what you do, it can have a purpose. Your podcast, Simon, has an incredible purpose. Mine has the purpose of helping people also through COVID get ideas to get back on track, to have hope, and also actionable steps. And without that, I wouldn't have to do this. I do this for that purpose. I get up in the morning to go help these people and be able to connect in ways that I can. It's been such a gift and a blessing that way. And so that does make a difference. The money shows up when you're on purpose. Yes.
Totally. And I know it's a word I use a lot. Of course, my business is called the Purposeful Project, so I'm bound to use the word purpose a lot. But it is something as well that takes time to find. But it doesn't take time to find it for a company that you run. On a personal level, maybe purpose takes time to find. But on a company level, there should always be a purpose. And so if you look at any successful business, the original idea that had a very purpose-driven mindset, like Apple, for example, Steve Jobs was always interested in the concept of, like, if you give a human a bike, look how much faster they can go. Imagine if you gave every human a computer. And that was his original idea. It wasn't about selling computers and making money. It was about powering up the human race. Elon Musk isn't making space rockets. That's not what he's doing. He's not sending people to the space station. That's not his plan. His mission is to make the human race a multi-planet species. He wants to ensure the survival of the human race. Right? Now that gets you up in the morning, doesn't it? That's going to get, he's got 5 kids, that's going to get him motivated to go to work. Otherwise, it's not easy to go to work when you're a billionaire. It's actually not easy to go to work when you're a billionaire because, you don't have to, right? So you need big, crazy missions to motivate you. And that also motivates people to do those big, crazy missions. But so many people don't think about this. And they wonder why they struggle to retain people, to hire people, to motivate themselves.
Yes, that does make a difference. And now you also are an angel investor. Can you share how that works for people looking for angel investors, or what that's about?
Yeah, on a simple level, it means that I invest in other people's ideas. So if someone has a crazy idea, I tend to offer them up capital and time. The bit I always personally value more is time, but capital is sometimes required. But I have invested in 69 startups, and it's part of my thing, I guess. I want to help. A lot of people say they need money to start a business. Quite often they don't. So I like to help people realize that. But if they do need money, and sometimes they do, then I like to invest in people and help them make their dream of a business come true. And so, it's something I do. I always tell people, you cannot be an angel investor and expect quick returns. I'm still invested in some businesses like 10, 11, 12 years before I either lose all my money or make money back. It's not a quick win, but it is incredibly rewarding if you get it right to back other people. And it's also a way of me scaling. I'm not 20 anymore, so I love investing in young people who have the time and energy to do something great. So it's kind of hobby for me, really, angel investing.
Right. Wow. So that's really interesting. Do you have advice for people listening in that are looking either for some type of other investor, or maybe they're turning in information to get a small business loan or something like that? What makes a business stand out in instances like that? What
The best way? I mean, this might sound again counterintuitive, but the best way to get money, for example, if you ask someone for money, they'll give you advice. If you ask someone for advice, they'll give you money. So, and the best thing to actually place to be is to not need the money.
Yes.
Okay. So most of the businesses I meet that say they need money, what they actually mean is they need more sales, for example. They need better cash flow management. They need priority investment strategies. And so it sounds easy, I'll raise money. We all read about it way too much in things like TechCrunch. But the reality is that every time you raise money and you sell equity to angel investors, so I could say this, anybody like me, you end up accidentally creating a business structure where you have a boss.
Mm-hmm.
So, I know it's the trend now, raise money, but there is definitely something. There are a lot of examples of businesses that raised a lot of money, and I was just looking at a tweet the other day. It was an example of a business that raised a lot of money, big headlines, but the founder had diluted. So he ended up with a £30 million equity stake, which is don't get me wrong, it's a lot of money, but a £30 million equity stake in a company where he owned a small percentage of that company. Mm-hmm. And then it compared it to someone else who had 100% of their company, but they were making £30 million a year profit, and they owned it 100%. So, I think the concept of owning a business and building it and enjoying it and not selling it is an art getting slightly lost in the noise of raising money. Yes. And I really think that there's a lot to be said for just building a company you love, being patient with it, growing it step by step, owning yourself, not having a boss, either an investor or anyone, and just building something that eventually works and you're happy with. That is something that is just not talked about enough on TechCrunch and these other platforms. And I think it is something that people would get a lot of enjoyment out of, because getting investors can be a pain in the butt.
Yes, I've never had investors, and I've never really gotten business loans or anything like that. I did have business finance versus personal finance to fund my stores that ended up buying the buildings and paying them all off, which was nice. I ended up with 5 stores, and they were all buildings that ended up cash flowing, that later I rented out full time and traveled when I was done running stores. And so that was easier for me. And I would rather have less, but have 100%, like you said, than have to, maybe there's a value difference where you've got to make sure. So if you are looking for somebody to invest in your company, make sure that your values align. What are your values? Yeah, that's so important, because if your company is based on values, that's going to drive the business, or it can sink the business if you lose that people first mentality and do something that's not an integrity for you. So that does really help.
Yeah, I think that's also true for employment. I think people don't ask the question about moral code and what is your moral code. It's almost like you don't see it on any employment agreements, and like, what is your moral code? Same for a lot of finance people. Frankly, their moral code is a bit corrupt, and we all know that from not everyone. I don't want to cast everyone under that that brush, but definitely knowing people's moral code is a very important question you're bringing up here that a lot of people do not ask. Just out of interest, just asking you a question. I guess as a parent, how did you manage to get work-life balance? How did you balance out building that business and having family time?
Well, I actually had 3 children of my own, and I adopted 3 more, and I had nannies, but they were with me at the store because the store was 5,000 square feet. So it was big enough to have a whole section. So before they went to school, they were there, and there was nannies actually from the church that we went to that we knew that worked with children for 20 plus years. And they were neighbors that were lonely. And so I always had my children with me. And then later on, I actually worked part-time teaching at the school because I delegated, and I had 5 stores running and employees. So I wasn't there full time. So I was able to be with my children more than if I worked for somebody else, for sure. But also I brought my children in to pieces of the business. I had a whole section that was for children, educational toys for children. And I would have my kids help me order the toys, the educational toys, and then they would come in on the weekend and they would play games, and the grandmas or the moms would come in and they would buy the toys because they would see my children playing. I mean, my son's like one of the top chess players now, and he gets paid just to play chess. And so it was part of teaching them by experience how to run a business and be part of that, because it's that thing about, you can't learn it from a book.
Yep. This is why I tell people all the time not to waste money on these courses or going to do MBAs, because it doesn't teach you the truth. And I also think there's something else you're mentioning here that's really important, which is a lot of people that have kids think, there's no way you can start your own business in time. But what actually is the truth when you have your own business is you can control the environment. So you can bring your kids in. I do exactly the same. I've got a 3.5-year-old, and I tried to include him in this tonight. I mean, he was not going to bed a minute ago. So I was like, okay, you can join me in the podcast. You can hang out. And I think that's actually a beautiful thing about being self-employed. You can make these decisions. Now, maybe you wouldn't have been happy with me, or maybe your audience wouldn't have liked it, but I can make that decision, right? I mean, I'm in that privileged position. I've worked hard for it, but I can bring my child into the equation, and I think that is the beauty of being self-employed. Again, that's why I think it's so much better than working for someone else. But if you don't build up your entrepreneurial skills, you could just end up having no choice but to work for someone else. But actually, your quality of time with your family, I think, is less than when you work for yourself. But a lot of people don't think that. They think the opposite. Working for yourself means no time with your family. You're doing something wrong if it's like that, in my view. You've not taken advantage of the few benefits that entrepreneurship bring you. One of them is the ability to control your own diary and the ability to control your own environment. You just said, build crash in your business premises, create an environment where the kids can get involved in what you're doing. And I think that's just the perfect answer you gave there to people listening, if they're wondering how to get the family life balanced and see entrepreneurship as a way of having less time. They're doing it wrong if there's less time with their family.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's beautiful. And it's really been a gift. All my kids have their own little side business. My daughter's in school because she's studying to be a psychologist, but she also has a side business. And so that's just it. And it does make a difference. I know that they're on their own 2 feet, and that they can figure things out. And even when they did work jobs when they were really young teens going into just your first job, they got into like managing because they valued business, and they had the integrity. They knew how important it was to lock up properly and to make sure and not leave 5 minutes before it's time to leave because you want to go have fun, because they understood the value of the business and why you're there. They got that from a whole different level. So
no, it's such an important education. And I see even with my son, I like him to see the struggle. I like him to understand. If I go to the office and don't see him all day, he doesn't understand who I am. So like, there's this thing in child psychology where I think, which is really important, which is if a child says to you as an adult, "Are you okay?" and you as a parent think you should tell them, "I'm okay, don't worry." And actually, what a child can read you and will know if you're lying or not. And that what happens when parents do that is the children learn not to believe their parent when they say that they're okay, because the child knows they're not. So in a work context, I don't come home and tell my son, "Oh, I've had a great day at work." I let him be a part of my day's work and see the highs and lows, which we all have. And I tell him the truth. He asked me the other day, so I was stressed about something. He goes, "What's the problem?" And I told him what the problem was. I told him exactly what's happening so he could understand what it's like. Not for him to worry, but for the opposite reason. He was worried anyway. He could tell I was in a funny mood, right? And kids are amazing like that. But I think when you bring them into your business, teaching them what's happening in the business can make them understand you as a person. And once they understand you as a person, I think they become closer to you and they grow up more independent, stronger minded, and have the ability to trust their gut. they've watched their parent do that.
Oh yes, that is so beautiful and right on point. That the best education that kids can get is to be part of what you're doing in life and to be really open about everything going on, no matter what it is. I mean, my poor kids, they participated in politics to have better education for everybody in the country and all these different things, even though they were stapling flyers or whatever it was, they got to be involved and they
Yep.
got to hear the stories also of the other adults in the room sometimes. And these rich stories from the grandmas, like the nannies that I hired were grandmas. That one lady actually worked in the White House for a while. And her stories and her vocabulary was incredible. And that these real stories are something that our kids have that are better than like a boring history book that has no emotions and feeling. So yes, so that was, I invested in those people, those extra grandmas, I guess you might call, really, because I wanted my children to have that connection and those stories. It was really important to me.
I think it is important. I mean, I would add to this as well. I think that for me, my experience is that there is no work-life balance, and in fact, I would say it'll drive you crazy trying to have one. And so, the best thing to do is accept that it's just life. And some weeks you might have to spend more time on your business, another week you can spend more time with your family, another week you spend more time on yourself. And I think that one of the things I think has kept me sane was getting a partner in life who completely understands how much I love to work and also then joins me in whatever it is that I'm doing. And that I've been married 20 years and happily, I think in large part it's because my partner has always tried to help me with what I'm doing. I've always tried to help her. I know a lot of people that don't know, I think they don't know their kids and the kids don't know the parents and the partners don't know each other. Like I've literally worked with people at work, they're different people to when I go and see them socially at their home. Different people. And it means their partner does not know who they really are. Whereas when you work with your partner, you really learn about each other. Same with kids. If kids see how you are in work, they really know who you are. And I think that's a really valuable thing to give people that are close to you a chance to know who you really are.
Yes, I think it's everything. And when we lose our essence to be something we're not, to please people or be in a job that maybe we don't fit or that's not aligned, that's when we lose our voice and our truth. And then our children learn to not be who they are.
That's right. Exactly.
Yes.
Yep. Why you should never say to your child if you're not feeling, if they say, "Are you okay?" You say, "Yes, I'm fine." You should never tell them that if you're not fine, because they know the truth. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting area.
I love that. And I would love to hear, now we're coming to the end of our talk time here. I'd love to hear maybe how people can connect with you, listen to your podcast, or get involved in other things that you're doing.
Yeah, well, I'm on all social media channels, like we all are these days. So you can connect to me on YouTube or, of course, Instagram. I'm on TikTok. And so, any of these channels that you use, feel free to connect. Of course, you can reach me through my website, simonsquibb.com. And if you want to check out any of our podcasts where we interview the world's most successful entrepreneurs, you can just go to purposefulproject.com. And if anyone out there wants to help to start a business, we are the only media platform in the world that help people for free start and grow a business. So if anyone needs any help, you can reach us through the purposefulproject.com.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you again for being a guest on the show. And for those tuning in, we'll be back after these messages. Stay tuned. All right, if you're just tuning in, this is the Sheila Mack Show on NBC's KCAA Radio, the station that leaves no listener behind. And I would like to invite you to get started if you are looking to reinvent, rebuild, and reboot your business and personal life and just want to start with the guidebook. Get Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. It is a great beginning guide to start getting back on track and rebuilding and rebooting your business this year. It is available at Amazon, Audible, Kindle, and SheilaMac.com, SheilaMac.com.
Also, if you'd like to go a little bit deeper in your business reboot, sign up for the Business Leader Reboot course at SheilaMack.com. That is, if you want to lead your team or your company to even more success, I help you using the Boots formula and my years of experience in business so that you can quickly and easily have even more success. Go to SheilaMack.com and under courses, look for Business Leader Reboot. To grab a copy of my new best-selling book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. It is now available on Audible as well as on Amazon and Kindle and at www.SheilaMack.com.